All right, the December 3rd, 2018 meeting of the Anne Arundel County Council is now in session. Please stand for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Lacey.
This is my first invocation, so don't judge me too harshly, please. There have been a lot of invocations already today, so I would just invoke the same spirit over our inauguration and also over our county council installation, that you would bless our eyes to see, our ears to hear, our minds to curiosity and asking questions here, our hearts to wisdom in making decision, and our hands to the work that's set before us as a council. Amen.
Thank you.
Amen.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will now read the ethics statement. The Ethics Commission has asked that I advise you that under certain circumstances, members of the public may qualify as lobbyists when they testify before the County Council. If so, the law requires that certain information be filed with the Ethics Commission. The Chairman of the Ethics Commission has asked that those present review the Ethics Commission information in the foyer of these chambers. If there are any questions about lobbying requirements, speakers should contact the Ethics Commission in the Heritage Office Complex on Riva Road. And we have a resolution. I will read it into the record. Resolution number 3918, resolution electing a chairman and vice chairman of the County Council. Whereas Section 302A of the Anne Arundel County Charter provides that the County Council at its regular meeting or session in December of each year shall elect a chairman and vice chairman from its membership. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the County Council of Anne Arundel County, Maryland, that it hereby elects Andrew Pruski, Chairman of the County Council, and be it further resolved that it hereby elects Allison M. Picard, Vice Chairman of the County Council. I will now call the roll on the resolution. Ms. Lacey.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volke?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler?
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Resolution number 3918 is adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First, as a point of personal privilege, I just want to thank my fellow colleagues for putting me in this position. Certainly, I appreciate that. And Ms. Pickard, congratulations on Vice Chairman. We're looking forward to certainly a great session, and congratulations to everyone. But we're now going to move quickly into invitation to audience. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to address the council briefly on any subject not put on today's agenda? I'm sorry, this is to anyone. I do have folks signed up. We'll call them up. Paul Bollinger, Lindo Curry, Dale Woldruff, Holly Kleigarten, and Elizabeth Rossberg. If you could come forward, please. And if you would, while you're coming forward, state your name and address, and you have 2 minutes, and I'll certainly let you know when those 2 minutes are up. Thank you. Mr. Bollinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I need to push one of these. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, congratulations to the County Council on your election, and to my County Councilwoman, Ms. Rodvian, who personally stopped at my house to thank me and asked for my vote. So, my name's Paul Bollinger. I live at 1109 Miami Avenue in Eastport, and I am the Executive Director of Chesapeake Region Accessible Boating, otherwise known as CRAB. We are a nonprofit that has provided sailing instruction and access to Chesapeake Bay for people with disabilities, wounded warriors, and our local youth from at-risk communities for the past 27 years at Sandy Point State Park. This past summer, CRAB held 3 kids sailing camps with Anne Arundel County Police for more than 50 youth, thanks to live casino funds. 3 youth and 1 police officer were on each sailboat, and our volunteer skippers helped to create the bond of teamwork, understanding, leadership that they were able to take back to their communities. Speaking of volunteers, CRAB has over 95 volunteers that donated more than 2,500 hours in our 7-month sailing season this year. And the thing that we hear from our volunteers is when they get off the boats after sailing with our special guests is how much it means to them to be able to make something special for them out on the bay. We're here to speak before the council about our highest priority, and that is the acquisition of a marina in Annapolis to create a premier adaptive boating center for expansion of our water activities and programs offered to an increasing number of guests. The project will use state program open space funds allocated to the county and city. The good news is twofold. The owners of the marina want to sell to CRAB, and the county and city have more than sufficient funds for the acquisition.
Mr. Bollinger, if you could summarize.
Yep. We're happy to provide more information on one-on-one briefings on this adaptive boating center. We've had the county support this past 5 months to move forward with this acquisition. The department heads are now waiting for the county to reinforce that it's still a county priority. And I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you so much. Ms. Curry?
Hi. I'm Linda Curry. I live at 707 Cottonwoods, Vernon Park. Myself and Ellen Moss have been representing the county council for the last almost 2 years with the BWI Roundtable. At BWI Airport, we wrangle with the FAA on a monthly basis when they decide to talk to us, and they're currently not. But we're having a meeting with them tomorrow night, and I just wanted to let the council know that we will still be sitting for you and tomorrow night, and we'll report back to you on whatever information we may come up with. The FAA seriously is not going to be coming to that meeting, so we're not really sure what we're going to be up against. But I wanted to say hello and put a face to it so you know who's representing you out there. Ellen Moss couldn't come tonight, but I hope that the next time we come and give you a report that she'll be with me.
Okay. And Ms. Curry, the council was sent an email about the roundtable and background, so just so you're aware of that you know that, and we're going to continue to work with you. So thank you for your work.
I really appreciate that. We've worked at this very hard. The first meeting was March of last year, March of year before. It's been a long time.
Absolutely.
It'll be 2 years in March, and it's not just at the table that we're working. We're also working with legislators in the state and federal levels to try and bring about some change on this, including the FAA reauthorization bill. We worked on that too.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming out.
You bet.
Thank you. Mr. Waldrop?
Hi, my name is Dale Waldrop. I'm the president of the Anne Arundel County Detention Officers for the detention centers at Jennifer Road and Ordnance Road. I live at 876 Claffey in Gambrels. My purpose of being here is I started coming to the county council meetings back in September, the Tuesday after Labor Day. And I came in to talk to the county council and explain that we had a 20% staffing deficit. We still do. To put that in numbers, that's 48 officers short right now. Again, I just want to let y'all know, I'm not asking for anything, I just want y'all to know, because I know a lot of stump speeches, we talked about police and fire. Police has been roughly at a 9% staffing deficit. We're roughly at 20, and it's just, we are part of your front line on public safety. We are part of your war on drugs. We fight them within our institutions. We have people who come to us every day because of one related issue or another having to do with drugs and or alcohol. And as county council folks, as a correctional officer for Anne Arundel County, we all have an inherent interest to send people home in better condition than when we receive them. We do that. We do that by way of alcohol education, drug education. We have mental health programming, and so like I said, we do a big public service. We just don't really get all the the public recognition that my fellow officers should get. But again, I just want you to understand that we are really short, and we will be needing your help trying to fix that issue as time goes by. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rolder. Heidi Kleiderlein?
Yes. Good evening, council members. My name is Holly Kleiderlein, and I reside at 707 Pine Drift Drive in Odenton, District 3. I am the school counselor for 691 students at Oak Hill Elementary School in District 5. I am here tonight because last year the Board of Ed recognized the immediate need for more elementary school counselors, so they recommended 14 additional positions. By the time the budget was finalized, that number was reduced to 3. Due to the increasing enrollment, this year, even with additional counselors, there were 21 elementary schools with a ratio of at least 600 to 1. To be clear, a ratio of 600 to 1 is ridiculous, and to have that repeated so many times across our county is negligent. Mr. Hsu recognized the need for additional mental health supports, so he added $15 million to the budget for school safety and mental health initiatives. In reality, less than 2% of that extra money was spent on mental health. That was for 2 school psychologists. School counselors are the only mental health professionals who provide preventative services for all students in our school system. People seem to think that counseling at the elementary level is somehow less than or easier than middle or high school. Let me illustrate the crises I've addressed recently. 2 years ago, I had 4 students who had a parent die as a result of overdoses or addiction-related suicide. I had 4 students leave school to visit the hospital for mental health concerns, and 3 of them were admitted for extended stays. Last year, I had 50 phone conversations with parents about anxiety, 20 about bullying, and 26 consultations with private therapists. Every elementary school is now equipped with naloxone and bulletproof shields. Please help us change the focus from crisis management to prevention by adding more elementary school counseling positions this coming budget cycle. And if any of you have questions about what I do, please call me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If you guys can get up, and you're dismissed. Thank you for coming. And we have Elizabeth Roseberg. And if there's anyone else that would like to speak, please come forward at this time. And again, your name and address, and then we'll move forward with the agenda if there's anyone else.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Rosborg, and I live at 24/7 Way in Arnold. I'm here tonight speaking as an executive member of Growth Action Network, and I'm here to give you an update on testimony I gave in November of last year on modifications. For example, a developer could get a modification to not hold a community meeting. The community will have no idea the property is proposed for development until the bulldozers show up. A developer can also request a modification to disturb steep slopes, remove large trees, and classify a road as private, smaller than county standards, just to name a few. In 2016, the county received 516 modifications requests, and all but 3 were approved, including 1 application for 13 modifications. While last year we had 603 modifications requests, and all but 2 were approved. At that time last year, Growth Action Network formally requested the county code be enforced and modifications become difficult to obtain instead of practically assumed. I'm happy to report someone was listening. To date, 403 modifications have been requested and 34 denied. The Planning and Zoning Officer, Phil Hager, has listened and now denies skipping community meetings, that he agrees that the community needs to be informed before the bulldozers show up. With the passage of the Charter Amendment, notification for new developments is now 300 feet. Thank you, Chris Trumbauer, for sponsoring that. With the passage of Bill 2718, modifications must be presented at community meetings, and people within 300 feet must be notified of the modification request, the reason for it, and receive a written copy. The property owner is now being informed. There are still 665 modifications pending, so there's work that needs to be done.
Ms. Rosberg, if you can summarize, please.
I am. Thank you. Growth Action Network looks forward to working with you. Now let's all get to work to continue to improve the process and the transparency. Thank you.
Ms. Johnson.
Oops. Is it on? Yes. Oh, my bad. Julie Johnson, P.O. Box 6634, Annapolis, Maryland. I would like to offer you congratulations on your inaugurations. And I think you've already noticed that it's worse than you thought it was. Here are people coming to you, telling you that there are really serious problems. And I looked at the list of problems I could talk to you about, and it was really hard to choose. But I felt that one of the things that is a really serious problem is the institutionalized, the social, built-in racism. And I think the quickest, I only get 2 minutes, so this is the short version. Some years ago, as a teacher, I had a conflict with my immediate supervisor. She would not provide me or my students with textbooks, chemicals, specimens for dissection, denied me notice of things that were due, and so on. So she was able to put me in the position of being a struggling employee. So and she wouldn't speak to me. So I finally went to her one afternoon, and I said to her, if you will tell me what I have done that has antagonized you so much, I will do everything I can to make amends. And the punchline you need to know is, you don't treat the black kids right. You treat them just like the white kids. You don't keep them in their place, and it makes me sick. Which was extremely difficult. It took me a month of nightmares. I finally went to the vice principal who supervised both of us.
Ms. Johnson, please summarize if you would, please.
So he and the principal essentially said, you know the kind of trouble this can cause. If word of this ever leaves this office, you will be charged with insubordination and terminated that very day. In other words, institutionalized racism is alive and well. Those people were retained and promoted, and all of the kids were supposed to learn how to put down others and how to practice racism.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, we will move on from invitation to audience. We want to thank everybody for coming out to share what's going on. Items not on the agenda. Is there any item any council member would like to place on the agenda? Okay, move forward. Like to move forward on preliminary motion. May I have a motion from a member of the council that any partial reading of any bill, resolution, amendment, or minutes constitute the reading of the whole? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second? Okay. Madam Secretary, could you please read the minutes of October 15th, 2018?
The meeting was called to order by Chairman Michael Peruka at 7 p.m. and opened with the invocation given by Mr. Pruski, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of October 15th, 2018?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. The motion carries. Minutes of October 15th, 2018 stand approved as read. Now the council will move forward on the interviews for the Board of Appeals applicants. The council will now interview applicants for the Anne Arundel County Board of Appeals. I want to go through and summarize Charter Section 601 and 602. The Board of Appeals consists of 7 qualified voters appointed by the County Council. The board is independent of both legislative and executive branches of the county government. The board hears appeals of certain county administrative orders and decisions. At this time, I'm going to call up the applicants who have applied. You will have to limit remarks to 5 minutes, and then we'll allow my colleagues to ask any questions if they have any. So again, I will start by going through the list. As I call your name, please come forward, and we'll start the clock for 5 minutes, Ms. Gray. Thank you. First applicant is Mr. David Bastian. Again, Mr. Bastian, if you would, your name and address, and then your time to explain why you should be on Board of Appeals.
Thank you very much, everybody. Congratulations on your new offices and hope that we can work together and keep this a great county. Now, my name's Dave Bastian. I live at 2660 Claiborne Road, Annapolis, Maryland. And I have a career as basically a civil engineer with specialty in river and estuarine hydraulics. And I've actually used that for years with the Corps of Engineers, Army Corps of Engineers, and now I've become, for the last 20 years, a consultant and work on issues dealing with runoff, dredging, shoreline protection, and traffic management. And the reason that I mention these specialties is because so many of the issues that come up are brought up by two sides dealing with these particular issues, and a lot of times the arguments put forward are emotional rather than factual, and I have the background to be able to discern which is factual and which is not, and apply that to hopefully a proper and just decision to various appeals that are made. The background that I have in more detail is that I have been involved with, 2 decades ago, I was the chairman of the Small Areas Committee for the Annapolis Neck for the county of Arundel. And in practice for these various appeals, I have participated in several, and also as an expert witness, and as an expert witness basically to provide expert testimony as to what the engineering or technical issues are with regard to that. So rather than take up 5 minutes, because I believe all of you were given a copy of my resume, if not, I can certainly give you a copy. So I'd like to take whatever time is left to allow you to ask any questions, and be glad to try to answer them.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for the candidates? Mr.
Chair, thank you. Mr. Bastian, thank you for being here. I'm going to ask you these questions, and I'll likely ask them to every applicant, so if all the applicants can be prepared to answer them, I'd appreciate it. Do you currently have any cases pending before the Board of Appeals? Have you had any cases before the Board of Appeals previously personally, and have you ever represented anyone before the Board of Appeals?
The answer to the first is no. The answer to the second is I participated in one as a witness, and the third one is no. Now, I can give more detail on the second if you wish.
Certainly, if you don't mind. Just briefly, please. But
okay. It was basically the Annapolis Roads versus Key School. I took a middle-of-the-road solution to what was a traffic mitigation issue and presented that to, I was neither for nor against the issue of whether the school moves in or out. It was more to wisely spend community funds and to try to get a solution that really provided to the issue which they claimed was safety.
Thank you, sir.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Moving on to the next candidate, Ms. Patsy Baker Blackshear.
Good evening, and congratulations. For the record, again, my name is Patsy Baker Blackshear, and I reside at 362 Southport Drive, Edgewater, Maryland. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening and to present my case before you. I am completing my first term as a member of the Board of Appeal, and I'm here requesting a reappointment for a second term. Hopefully, amongst all the paper you've seen, you've received my resume. And if so, and you had a chance to look at it, you can see that I am indeed qualified as a representative on this body. I have an extensive range of leadership experiences in multiple organizations at the federal level, where I retired as a senior executive manager in the local governments, large local school systems, and also at the university level and in private sector. So I've had a lot of experiences in work areas, and most of those were in financial and general management of all types. In addition to that, I've spent a lot of time working in the community as a community volunteer, again, in a lot of different organizations. And over the last term, I've had an opportunity for the last 4 years to function effectively as a member of the Board of Appeal. And I say effectively because I've had an opportunity and gained a first-hand working knowledge and experience of the understandings, the functions, the laws, the regulations, and operations of the Board of Appeal. And I've had the ability and opportunity to work effectively with my other board members and to work independently to provide sound decision-making based on factual evidence and application of the board's requirements. I have shown a willingness to adjust my schedule to put in the rigorous time commitments to serve effectively as a member of the board. In my last term, I was able to attend at least 90% of all the hearings that we held, and that took a lot of attention, a lot of time, and a lot of commitment, and I'm willing to continue to do that. Finally, I think it's advantageous to the Board of Appeals to have a mix of persons who've had the experiences, because the cases that we hear are cases that I believe would benefit from people who understand the processes and operations of the Board of Appeal. Therefore, given the totality of my work experience, my community experience, my time on the Board of Appeal, and my commitment to serve effectively, I hope you agree with me and will move forth to decide that I am a positive contribution to a member of the Board of Appeal. Again, I trust that having looked at my application, your deliberations will be positive in my favor, and I will be reappointed to a member of the Board of Appeal for a second term. Thank you for your time, for your attention, and I stand ready to respond to any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions?
How did you know, Mr. Chair?
We heard the rumor.
Ms. Blackshear, thank you for your service, and thank you for coming here today. I think it's actually Dr. Blackshear, isn't it? Okay.
They call me that, too.
Well, I saw the PhD, so I assumed as much. As you stated, so you are currently on the Board of Appeals. Are you aware that the Board of Appeals currently has a 6-month backlog of cases?
I do know we have an extensive backlog. We meet all of the time, yes.
Right, and so have you all been meeting 3 days a week? Is that my understanding?
Yes, we do.
Okay. What's the time limitation on how long you're meeting on those 3 days?
Time limitations in terms of the scheduling?
Certainly. My understanding, not to interrupt you, but my understanding is that typically the board will meet for 2 hours, and at the end of 2 hours, that's the end of the meeting. Is that
Usually
correct?
we have met for 2 hours. With the closing term, we met for as long as was necessary, 5 hours sometimes.
When you say the closing term?
As we were closing out cases that we were hearing.
Okay, so have you closed out all the cases that you were to hear?
We have closed them all out. We have another one, in fact, tomorrow that just came up.
Okay, all right. Do you believe that the workload of the current Board of Appeals is too heavy?
I think it's extremely heavy.
Okay.
I do have associates who are on Board of Appeals in other jurisdictions, and it's nothing like the caseload that we have here.
Do you know how the current caseload of the Board of Appeals presently compares to the historic caseload of the Board of Appeals in Anne Arundel County?
I understand that it's about the same.
Okay, that was my understanding too, so I just want to make sure
I understand what's about
okay.
the same, because I've asked that question because I thought it was extremely heavy as well.
Okay. I have nothing further, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
You had 3 questions that you had asked beforehand.
Oh, well, I'm happy to ask you those.
But the answer is no.
I was assuming if you were on the board, the answer was no, so thank you.
The answer is no.
Any other questions? Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Yes. Mr. Paul Devlin. Once again, Mr. Paul Devlin. Okay. Mr. Spencer Dove. You You may begin. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman Pruski, Vice Chairwoman Pickard, members of the County Council. My name is Spencer Dove. Address 7692 Fairbanks Court, Hanover, Maryland 21076. I just want to echo again, congratulations on your inauguration, on your election to leadership positions. And as a resident of Anne Arundel County, I am very much looking forward to the ensuing term and what each of you has to offer for the future and prosperity of our county. So thank you in advance for your service. In addition to my resume, I did include a cover letter. I hope it made it in there, just kind of my philosophical perspective on why I feel I'm qualified, so I'm not going to harp too much on that. Just a little bit about me, since I'm meeting many of you for the first time face-to-face. I am pretty much a lifelong resident of Anne Arundel County. I am the middle child. My mother raised us on her own. She was disabled and also an Army brat herself, so we got many of those values. I graduated from Old Mill High School in 2005, and I graduated from Washington College in 2009. Ever since then, in December 2009, I began working in the Maryland General Assembly as a legislative director to Delegate Roger Mano from Montgomery County. Then I moved to be Delegate Jocelyn Pena-Melnick's chief of staff, and then since May of 2013, I have been the assistant to the executive director for the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. And I bring all of this up because public service is really in my blood. That's my passion. When the county council, your previous county council, your predecessors, appointed me to the Board of Appeals, it was a call to serve. And at 27 years old, that was a big call to serve. A lot of life to learn, a heavy subject matter, land use zoning, administrative decisions by the county, animal control cases. A lot of it very new to me, but when I received notice of the appointment, I was sworn in, I jumped in feet first. I made sure to read through all of the relevant law, take the necessary course materials online to be able to say, I know what I'm talking about with respect to smart growth, with respect to the Chesapeake Bay and all of the other laws in areas that the Board of Appeals enforces through the variances, nonconforming uses, and even all the rezoning applications that we have received. I'm asking for the honor to continue on the Board of Appeals a second term because the experience has been incredible for the past 4 years. One of the things that really hit me hardest after we were done hearing cases was an individual came up to me and said that she really appreciated my thoughtful questions, the fact that I remained engaged throughout the case, that I made sure to ask the questions, give individuals the time to speak. And to me, that's incredibly important because so many folks feel like their government does not listen to them. It shuts them out. But they did not have that impression being before our board. And that, I think, is one of the most powerful opportunities that we, as an administrative body, reading and objectively interpreting the criteria that we are expected to uphold under law, that is what we offer the public. And I know that I myself have had to disjoint myself from my personal opinions with cases and look at the actual facts that are before us. And I can honestly say that reflecting on every decision that I've participated in, I stand by each of my votes, and I'm really proud of that. And I would really appreciate the opportunity to continue that level of service, to keep re-engaging not only the professionals that are bringing these applications before us, but the members of the public that are taking times out of their day, separating themselves from their family late at night, to come down and make sure that their opinions are heard. And with that, I'll close and defer everything else to my cover letter, and certainly any questions that you have, I look forward to answering them. It's just, I will remark, it's interesting being on this side of the table for a change because I've been up there so frequently. But thank you again for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Mr. Volke?
Back again. Mr. Dove, again, thank you for your service on the Board of Appeals. You had heard I ask a few questions to Dr. Blackshear. I'm going to ask you this with respect to something that you just said. You mentioned that citizens appreciate the opportunity to be heard and to not feel like they're being shut out by their government. I completely agree with you. My understanding of the Board of Appeals is that at basically this 2-hour mark, if you will, the way the current Board of Appeals has been operating is that people have been shut down at that moment, and they've been told, That's the end of the Board of Appeals hearing. If you're not done, well, you'll have to come back on another day. Has that been your experience with the Board of Appeals too, or am I misinformed on this?
It has been the experience, and thank you for asking that question, because I had the opportunity to actually chair 2 cases that were before our board toward the end of our term. One was a case we've issued this decision. It was 2 brothers that were attempting to unmerge by law lots so that way they could build their family homes. Had to remove myself. It was a great plan, but I had to enforce the law. The law said that the lots were merged, so that was it, and that was the decision that we handed down. Case of decisions currently pending actual signature. I'm not going to go into specifics. We had a huge turnout from the public, and one of the things when I was chairing that case, and my colleagues on the board appreciate it, I was running the case as long as I could into the night. We were going over the 2-hour mark because I know that the audience had sat there and waited so patiently to be heard, and I wanted them to give that opportunity. There were a couple of nights that I did unfortunately lose quorum, and I was forced to shut the meeting off, but when we came back the next time, they knew that we were going to run over that 2-hour mark if it meant that that case was going to close.
Okay. Was the reason that these cases are being shut down at 2 hours because you're losing quorum, or was that because it was a standing board policy?
It was a leadership decision by the chairman at the time.
Okay.
But any time I will add this on, any time the chairman indicated that he wanted to run over, I made myself available.
Okay. And with respect to how the currently constituted board worked, I had heard some suggestions from individuals that there were what I'll call personality conflicts between some of the board members that ultimately led to the board having to adjourn at certain points, go into a side room, and then come back. Did you have any experience with that while you were on the board?
Certainly there were personality conflicts, but they were resolved. I'm not going to get into that because, as you remarked, we went into a side room, we sought counsel. But so we went into closed session.
Okay.
But at least I never saw it appropriate for me to have personality conflicts, especially in the middle of a case. I can't recall a time that at any point during a case I would have had a personality conflict. I know that there were others that may have not agreed with each other, but I was there to hear the facts of the case and render a decision.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that. And so from your perspective, obviously I'm not trying to impugn that you are the person, but were there instances where there had to be an adjournment of the meeting and individuals had to go into other rooms because of the personality conflicts, to the extent that the public is sitting there waiting for the meeting to resume?
I wouldn't say that that was necessarily the personality conflicts. I would say that that was more so the individuals that were voicing their opinions or had questions, needed the advice of legal counsel, because a lot of their confusion or frustration was really grounded in needing legal advice, and then we would come back and we would proceed.
And do you think the lack of attorneys on the board as currently constituted helped or hindered that board?
I don't think it had, frankly, any impact, because our counsel has always been accessible even after hours. I know both Ms. Ward and Ms. Schmidt, I would be on the phone with them regularly, coming up to deliberation meetings, just making sure that I have my I's dotted and T's crossed.
Absolutely. And I know both of them, and I know that they're extremely accessible, so it was in no way suggesting that they weren't accessible.
I know.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep. Mr. Richard Fargo?
Good evening, everyone, and congratulations again on your inaugurations. Members of the council, my name is Rick Fargo, and for the last 4 years, it has been my pleasure to serve this county as a member of the Board of Appeals, including the last year and a half as its chairman. Over that time, I've listened intently to hundreds of petitioners and protestants, heard cases involving zoning changes, variances, special exceptions, animal control cases, and personnel issues. I did my best to measure the participants' positions along with the county's stance and attempt to make a reasonable, fair-minded decisions based on the rule of law. There were many cases over that time that were challenging and contentious. Through them all, I feel confident that I was fair and reasonable in my votes. I lived in Anne Arundel County for 24 years now, and I have a long history of community involvement. I live in Pasadena now. I spent many years as an officer with the Linthicum Shipley Improvement Association. I began developing an understanding of the county's land use practices as co-chairman of the BWI Linthicum Small Area Planning Committee. These experiences gave me a unique insight as a Board of Appeals member. Those experiences helped me understand the people's view, but they gave me an earnest appreciation for the county's role too. It was an honor to serve these last 4 years, and if you would consider me, it would be my honor to serve in that capacity again. I thank you for your time, and I'll answer whatever questions you have of me.
Mr. Volke.
Up again. Mr. Fargo, again, I appreciate your service on the Board of Appeals. Thank you. And I hope that it's understood with this that I'm trying to understand the facts of how this current board has worked and
absolutely.
Figure out what's going on.
No worries.
Thank you. So with that, I was going to follow up on something Mr. Dove had mentioned. He'd mentioned that it was a leadership decision that these hearings were only going to go for the 2-hour limit. You noted that you were the chairman for the last 1.5 years of the board. Was this a decision that you made?
It was not.
Okay. And was it a prior chair, or was it a board decision that was made before you were the chair? I'm just trying to understand how it happened, I guess.
Yes. When the 2014 to 2018 board convened, a policy decision was made by the chair at the time to limit hearings to 2 hours.
And did that become a standing policy of the board?
It did.
And so did that perpetuate for the full term of 2014 to 2018?
Let's see, how would I put it? When I took over as chair, I extended the hearings to as long as we needed to, within reason. If we had a hearing that we knew was going to go 3 or 4 hours, and it was a Tuesday meeting which starts late, I tried to clip it around 2.5 or 3 hours. On Wednesdays, we had hearings that went as long as 6 hours.
Okay. And if you can, just because I don't think many people, particularly my constituents and maybe even me, know this answer, but when does the board typically meet? Is it Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and what are the hours of those meetings?
The hours are set by the chair, and this past session, this past session, we met Tuesdays at 6. We met Wednesdays at 3:30, and we met Thursdays at 5:30.
Okay. And with these meetings, would it have been possible to meet fewer days a week, but for longer periods of time?
I suppose if we had scheduled it out further. The problem with the 2-hour meetings was that it really, really pushed the backlog out far. And once you get those scheduled, it's difficult to get back in there and reschedule them because there aren't that many openings. And then you run into the problem of hearings that get extended out over the course of months. And so I would prefer to extend the days. The backlog is enough where I think we need to keep our days.
Agreed. And so just so that I'm understanding this correctly, the original board 2014 sets the policy, we're going to meet for 2 hours. That's the end, no ifs, ands, or buts. That's created this backlog. Am I hearing you correctly on
that was
how
the
that
chairman.
started?
That was the chairman's decision.
Understood. At any point after that, when that individual was no longer the chairman, could the board as constituted have changed that policy to then decide that you all were going to get rid of this 2-hour rule?
Yes, we could have.
Okay.
And by and large, we did. I mean, we extended meetings. There wasn't a single hearing during my term where I said, we're done.
How long do you anticipate that it will take the board, whatever the board may look like, to get through the current backlog of cases that are before the Board of Appeals?
If we stick our nose to the grindstone, we can probably thin that out probably in 6 to 7 months.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Volke. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Fargo. Moving along. Mr. John Fury.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Madam Vice Chairman, Ms. Fiedler, others, council, congratulations to you all on your inauguration. Meeting many of you for the first time this evening, so it's nice to see new faces. I have a statement that I would just like to read, simply because it makes things easier, I found in my experience. And it keeps me from rambling, which is also a good thing. Good evening. My name is John Fury, and I've applied to become a member of the Anne Arundel County Board of Appeals for the 2019 to 2022 term. I have been a county resident for nearly all of my life, and I was employed as a planner with the County Office of Planning and Zoning from 2006 to 2014. I was assigned to the Zoning Division for my entire tenure with the Office of Planning and Zoning, and I was responsible for preparing departmental staff reports, findings and recommendations for zoning applications throughout Anne Arundel County. I handled zoning petitions from intake to appeal, as well as provided zoning review and approval of residential and commercial subdivisions, building and grading permits, non-conforming usage and signage, among other things. I answered zoning inquiries from citizens, property owners, developers, staff, and the general public. I reviewed over 1,000 zoning cases while at planning and zoning, many of which were subject to critical area regulations. These applications included variances, special exceptions, rezonings, critical area reclassifications, zoning map line adjustments, and non-conforming uses. I represented the Office of Planning and Zoning at public hearings before the Administrative Hearing Officer, as well as the Board of Appeals, and I've been accepted as an expert witness in land use planning by both entities. Over the course of my career, I've gained considerable knowledge and experience in zoning and permitting matters that routinely come before the Board of Appeals. As a county planner who has testified often at the Board of Appeals, I'm very familiar with the appeals process and the rules and regulations under which the board operates. As a planner making recommendations on county zoning applications, one is guided by two sets of county regulations, primarily: the zoning ordinance and the general development plan, with the assistance of the more localized small area plans as appropriate. A few fundamental principles of land use are that zoning relief or change must not alter the essential character of the neighborhood in which it is located. It must not have an adverse impact on the public health, safety, or welfare, and the application must be in compliance with the general development plan. As a board member, I would place those essential principles in the highest regard when deciding appeals, just as I did as a county planner. In closing, Anne Arundel County and District 5 are my home. I grew up in Severna Park and Glen Burnie, and my residence of 13 years is about 1 mile away from my childhood home on Cypress Creek. I have a long-time vested interest in Anne Arundel County, and I want to see it thrive well into the future. Having a proactive Board of Appeals, making sound land use decisions based on the laws and regulations of this county is certainly part of that equation. And I believe that the board would benefit greatly from having a member with my professional experience and background. It would be my honor and privilege to serve in that capacity as a member of the Board of Appeals. Thank you very much for the opportunity to appear tonight before you, and I'll answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Fury. Mr. Volke?
Mr. Furry, thank you for your application. I'll just ask you the 3 questions that I'm asking of non-incumbent Board of Appeals members, which are, do you have any cases currently pending before the board?
I do not.
Okay. Do you have any cases where you've previously been involved before the board?
None that I'm aware of, no.
All right. And have you ever represented anyone before the board?
No, just that for the county.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Ms. Lacey.
I'd like to ask you a little bit about your employment
Of course,
history.
of course.
What was the reason for your move from Anne Arundel County Office of Planning and Zoning to the town of Centerville in 2014?
Career development. At the time, I had been a planner for over 8 years, staff planner. I felt that, as is the case with a lot of planners, you want to do more. You want to be more involved. I would have rather have been more involved at Anne Arundel County, but you go where you can go. And I felt that the town of Centerville, obviously it's a very small town, it's much different planning issues than a large county like Anne Arundel, but I learned a lot of things about small town planning and how to implement their community plan, which is their equivalent of the general development plan. I learned a lot. I basically ran the entire shop with 2 administrative assistants. They couldn't afford, obviously, a large full-time planning staff. And evidently, budgetary issues is what caused me to leave. They had a hard time affording to pay even myself. So, you know, it was a learning experience. I enjoyed it a great deal. And I'm happy that I had it. Since then, I've now, you know, I do independent consulting work now, not within Arundel County, some with Queen Anne's, some with Baltimore City. I had some working relationships when I was a consultant before, and even Baltimore County. And it's just been an interesting mix, but, you know, I'm an Anne Arundel County guy, and I'm always going to be here, and I'm always going to want to serve here in some way. And I think this is a really good way to do it.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Phoebe.
In light of the testimony about the 2-hour limitation that was implemented, if you were to become chairman of this board, would you be open to extending past 2 hours to expedite the case?
Yes. In fact, I'll even go, I mean, I'll state that as a staff planner, you know, I appeared before the board starting in 2006, from 2006 to 2014. And in the beginning, of course, the board was quite different then in composition. Some cases went very long. Would go, you know, almost to midnight. Of course, you remember the little Darrell Wagner and the Little Island case. That was my boss, Susie Schaffer's case. That was 27 nights at the Board of Appeals. And yes, we all had to memorize that as staff planners, 27 nights. But certainly, I think some cases, you know, just by their nature, you're not going to get through a case like that or any other sensitive case in 2-hour nights and have it done in a reasonable amount of time. You're going to need longer. You're going to have to get a consensus on how long. Obviously, most folks have day jobs, including the board and everyone who's going there, so you have to be reasonable. But yes, many cases are going to take more than 2 hours, and I would support that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any other? Mr.
Chair,
Volke?
yeah, one follow-up, Mr. Fury.
Sure.
In light of your institutional knowledge with respect to Anne Arundel County and your opportunity to present cases in front of the Board of Appeals, in your experience, did you ever know the Board of Appeals to have a 6-month backlog on an appeal?
I couldn't give you a direct answer, with a fact, but I know that there were times when there were extensive backlogs, and it was due to one thing or another. It wasn't always, I would say, due to something with the board's procedure, you know, because at the time, even early in my career at the county, you know, there have been backlogs, and they were hearing cases 3-4 hours sometimes. It may have just been influx of cases. You know, you have some years, and I can say this also at planning and zoning. We had some years where we'd have, you know, 300, 350 total zoning cases. Other years you'd have 500, 600 cases. And then, of course, it's tied somewhat to the economy as well. So there are a lot of factors I would say that go into that. You know, during the doldrums of the bust, we had many less cases total, which out of those would be, you know, 5% or less appealed. There are a lot of factors. I guess that's kind of a long way to answer that.
Okay, and I appreciate that answer. I do. I can tell you that I have these statistics from the Board of Appeals from 2011 through 2018, and I can tell you that the workload of the Board of Appeals has actually gone down over the past 4 years as compared to the prior 4 years. So I guess what I'm trying to understand is this a typical and normal backlog for 6 months from someone taking an initial appeal to having their case heard before the board, or in your experience, would this be atypical?
From what I can recall, it may be a little on the long side. I think typically it would be closer to 3 or 4 months.
Okay.
You know, but again, things have changed in the 4 years I've been out of the county also. Now you're saying there's less total, you know, less cases. That shouldn't really necessarily affect, it should affect it in a positive way, you would think. But, you know, I can tell you from my recollection, 3 to 4 months was the average while I was with the county.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Fury.
Thank you.
Mr. John Gallagher.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. I join in the round of congratulations. Welcome. My name is Jack Gallagher. I live at 5 Park Place in Annapolis. I am a lawyer. I am a retired partner in a large Washington law firm where I practiced labor and employment law for 35 years. My only current employment is as an adjunct professor teaching labor and employment law at Dickinson Law School, which is part of Penn State University in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. I have, in the course of my career, handled hundreds of litigation matters in the labor and employment arena. Many of those were large and complex matters, and one of the things I think that I might bring to the table, if you will, if I am appointed to the board, is some experience in judicial administration and case management. There are surely some techniques widely used by effective judges to expedite litigation matters. No hearing should run 27 nights. That's readily apparent, and the board should not have a 6-month backlog is equally apparent. Now, I do not come to you with an agenda or a philosophy other than a willingness to engage in some level of public service. My philosophy is to be open, to be fair, to follow the law. I know from experience that the level of intensity or emotion that follows a particular case does not always match the merits of the case on the facts. I could pledge only, in the abstract, an impartial vote, a fair hearing, and a willingness to listen. With that, I submit my candidacy. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. No, I have not had a matter before the board. I do not currently have a matter before the board. There was a third question.
Have you represented anyone before the board?
I have not. All of my matters were labor and employment matters. None of them were local to Anne Arundel County.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Gallagher. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Mr. F. Joseph Gormley.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chairman, members of the council, good evening. F. Joseph Gormley, 790 Shelton Road in sunny Crownsville, Maryland. First thing I'd like to say is I think that last guy stole my thunder. I think you should definitely appoint him. I'm going to give all the same reasons. I, too, am a former big firm lawyer. Now many of you know me, or some of you know me anyway, as a boutique firm lawyer here in Annapolis, where I've more recently, over the last few years, become more involved in politics. And as I have, I've started to notice some things, particularly as Councilman Volke is raising, about some of the ways some things have been run in the county. And I believe that I can bring a level of professionalism and effective docket control and analysis to the Board of Appeals. In my training as a lawyer, both in a large firm, medium firm, and boutique capacity, I've had to become familiar with how to quickly digest cases, how to quickly digest the law, quickly digest the facts, and understand the application of each to reach a conclusion in an effective way for my clients. I'm primarily a business lawyer, for those of you who don't know me, and hopefully that came through on the resume, brief as it was. I've got experience in all manner of matters in business law, of course. I don't do any specialty work such as ERISA, but I've served all manner of businesses, and I'm conversant with labor and employment laws for that reason, some land use and zoning. I do not have any cases in front of the Board of Appeals currently. I have not represented any, and I've not acted as a witness or had a case personally in front of the board. But I believe I could bring a level of professionalism, of docket management and control, so that the citizens of Anne Arundel County could feel like their matters were heard effectively, were heard quickly, were heard thoroughly, and that the judgment rendered was fair, impartial, and according, ultimately, this is the most important part, according to the law. With that, I'd yield the rest of my time for any questions you all may have.
Any questions from council members? Ms. Harris.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just curious, why the Massachusetts bar membership?
Oh, that's a very good question. Actually, I'm a New England boy by birth, and I thought I was going to go back up to New England to practice law. I came down to Maryland to go to law school for a number of reasons that were we need not go into here. But ultimately what I learned is that once you start in a law school, you start building your network the first day. And so even though I went back up and took the Massachusetts bar and intended to return to New England to practice, I found really that ultimately I was better off down here. I'd started building a network when I started at University of Maryland School of Law. That continued through my practice at what is now DLA Piper. It was then Piper and Marbury, which is a great old Baltimore firm where I learned a lot and met a lot of great people. And you just, ultimately it just didn't work to go back up to New England. But I guess I've just kept the bar membership up all those years. There's no chance of me fleeing during the middle of the term and decamping to Massachusetts. I'll just say that I'm too dug in down here. You can ask any of these fellows who know me around here. They'll tell you I'm not leaving. So.
Okay, any other questions?
Mr.
Ms. Lacey?
Yes. What kind of work do you do in the business transactions portion of your practice currently?
Well, it's pretty much anything for local businessmen or large businessmen. My work breaks down really into three areas. You said business transactions is one of them. I also do litigation and counseling. In business transactions, I might do anything like, for example, right now I'm handling the sale of a retail store in Annapolis. I've done work selling restaurants. I've worked a lot in the restaurant industry. I think some people are familiar with my work in that area. Either buying businesses, selling businesses, facilitating those transactions, counseling the board, for example, in the larger businesses, working out arrangements between shareholders, resolving shareholder fights. That tends to get more in the litigational side, but if you do it right, it stays transactional, or maybe sometimes, if you're really lucky, you can pull one that's about to become litigation back over to the transactional side, which is always really what we try to do. It's cheaper for the clients, ultimately.
Sure. As a litigator myself, I definitely appreciate that. But have you considered the ethical implications of any, or the effect on your practice?
Yeah, because I don't typically represent people before the board right now, and so I did discuss that with my partners, and obviously if anything came up that was an ethical conflict, I would have to step out of that if I was appointed to the board. But right now we don't have anything that we feel would be an ethical conflict because we don't have anything that's either for or against the county or coming up in any of those contexts where it might be a Board of Appeals matter or something that might end up before the Board of Appeals. We don't have anything currently in the hopper, and we don't plan on getting anything. My current practice, I still do some Fortune 500 stuff. For example, I'm counsel to an organization called the Petroleum Environmental Research Forum, which is all the major oil companies. And we get together and try to leverage the available HSE dollars in joint research and development projects in that space. I do a lot of local work here in the city, and I do some work more broadly in the state, but I don't really anticipate any ethical conflicts coming before the Board of Appeals, simply because I've not ended up there yet in my practice out in Annapolis, and I've been out here since '04.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Lacey. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Gormley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. Moving along, Ms. Nancy Hirshman.
Good evening, everyone. Congratulations. I add my congratulations on the election and on your election this evening. I'm Nancy Hirshman. My address is 1716 Point No Point Drive. That's in Annapolis, 21401. I've lived there since 1981. I believe you all have a copy of a very brief resume that I submitted. The reason I'm interested in the position and on the Board of Appeals, in anticipation of Mr. Volke's question, is my own personal experiences with the Board of Appeals. I first had contact with the board when I was retiring from the Office of the State's Attorney. When I went to work for the State's Attorney, I was a contract employee. My contract specified that I was entitled to all of the benefits of county employees, with the exception of borrowing from the credit union. However, when I was ready to resign, they did not want to pay my sick leave. Contract clearly stated that I was entitled to the sick leave, but they refused to pay. I had no alternative but to file an administrative hearing. When I walked in that evening, I saw a bench full of white-haired gentlemen. The first question I was asked is, "Are you an attorney?" My response was no, and it went downhill from there. The county submitted letters as part of their evidence that they said that they had sent to me during these periods of time. I had never received any of those letters. To abbreviate the story, let's just say that I prevailed and I ended up being paid for my county sick leave. The second experience that I had with the Board of Appeals is when the county said that I was a double dipper with the state's attorney's office, and that there was some sort of law at the time that I retired that said if I returned to employment for the county, I was to be penalized $1 for every 2 I earned. That went on. There were 8 of us in the state's attorney who were accused of this double payment. It went on for many, many weeks and many, many months. Again, there was an accord reached with the county on that. We did not have to repay our pension, but it cost me $17,000 in attorney's fees to protect my rightful. I've tried to keep up since I've been a resident of Anne Arundel County with the government. I'm interested in the county in which I live. I am a 30-year mediator. I've heard a lot of information tonight about different kinds of conflicts, personality or business or interest of different things. And as a mediator, I could bring some skills to trying to keep things moving in a more constructive direction. That's pretty much why I'm here applying. Any questions anyone would like to ask?
Thank you. Any of the council members? Okay, thank you, Ms. Hirshman. Appreciate your time. Call up the next applicant, Mr. Darrin Michael Jacobs.
I want to piggyback on the congratulations on a successful campaign and all the hard work, and I know that went into getting elected. So congratulations. My name is Mike Jacobs. I go by Mike Jacobs. It's Darrin Michael Jacobs. I live at 8246 Bodkin Avenue, Pasadena, Maryland. Sorry, my voice is kind of hoarse. I coach a lot of ball for girls and boys, and just had a basketball game. A little bit about myself. I graduated '84 in Pasadena, Chesapeake High School, and I went right to work for NSA. After 6 years of that, my family called upon me to take over a family business, and I've been working for my mom and dad for 30 years. So after a second marriage, my wife and I, we've combined marriages. I have 6 children and three grandkids and 1 more on the way. To get to why I believe I would be a great candidate for this, for the last 20 years, have committed myself to community service and to community service in a great deal, starting with just volunteering in sports organizations, going over to the Pasadena Business Association, which I've been the president of many times, vice chair, I had many committees, and I've always felt that once I get into those types of organizations, I always try to leave it better than the way I found it. So I've gone to reach out to think outside the box and to do things that nobody else really does. I created the Veterans Day flag raising ceremony in Pasadena, and then I went upon doing the Christmas tree lighting ceremony, which you're all invited to tomorrow night in Pasadena. We'll have Santa Claus there, have pictures. But local politicians have seen my involvement and what I was able to do in so many different organizations. I do run the Lakeshore Athletic Association for girls softball and field hockey, and they're aware of what I'm able to do in my leadership skills, that I have been appointed to numerous commissions and transition teams. I'm currently on the Rec and Parks Advisory Board. I'm on the, I actually just resigned from the Amusement License Commission. Been on everything from Fort Smallwood Park Advisory Board to many transition teams. And I just put myself out there because I know what communities need. I know that they need leaderships. And there's not too many people that are out there that do that. I have extensive experience. When my wife and I got married, we bought a piece of property, and I went through a subdivision. Kind of educated me real quick on that. Then we had to run into many critical area issues. Educated myself on that. I played as a general contractor in building my property. Since I was able to have 3 properties, I built 2 more homes on those properties and still own them today. So I have extensive knowledge in many, many areas of what most people are bringing to the Board of Appeals, that I think I'll give a different outlook on that can be helpful in many ways. My business is we manufacture boat lifts, and we have an industrial repair machine shop. So I'm very, very familiar with the critical area laws, because we're dealing with the waterfront properties almost on a daily basis. But pretty much that sums me up. I just want to continue what I've been doing for over the last 20 years, and I just want to keep putting my name out there and helping out whenever I possibly can.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. Any questions?
Mr. Pruski, yes. Mr. Jacobs, thanks for coming down. The same 3 questions I've asked anybody. Do you have any cases currently pending before the board?
No, I do not.
All right. And have you had any cases in the past that you've been involved with before the board?
No, I have not.
And have you ever represented anyone before the board?
No, I have not.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Sir? Oh,
yes.
just a couple
sorry,
questions. No. I'm sorry. You say on here you have an understanding of stormwater management and comprehensive rezoning. Is that just from your personal experience building
All
your homes?
personal experience.
Okay,
yes.
so not separate educational training?
No, just
okay.
Actually, to build my home, it took me 5 years to build my home because of so many different regulations, and a lot of it was the stormwater issues and things like that. So after 5 years dealing with your engineer and with the county directly, you get to know and remember and feel the impact.
And if you were on, I'm going to circle back to actually Councilman Volke's questions from earlier about expanding the hours of the Board of Appeals if you were to be on there. Would you be willing to do that?
Absolutely, absolutely. When I first heard about the backlog, it kind of blew me away. And then when they were saying there's only a 2-hour time limit, that doesn't make sense. And whatever time is needed, you know, I don't go to bed till after 1 o'clock every night anyway. So just definitely want to get through that.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Anyone else?
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Moving along, Mr. Anthony Lamartina.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Madam Vice Chairman. My name is Anthony Lamartina, and I do live at 426 Beach Road in Arundel, Maryland. Congratulations to each and every one of you for your, I know, hard-fought election victories. And I'm sure you're glad to get a break. But anyway, I have an extensive resume that I'm positive that you all have taken a look at. I also have a past life as a member of the Board of Appeals. Rather than highlight all of that, I'll just say that something that you're not going to notice on the Board of Appeals that I enjoyed doing during my tenure was writing opinions. I had written many concurring opinions and many dissenting opinions. One in particular was a 5-1 majority where I dissented, and I happened to be chairman at the time, and it was reversed at the circuit court. They reversed the majority of the circuit court, special court of appeals, and the court of appeals. In all three incidences, my opinion was mentioned during that reversal. So rather than give you any more information about why I want to be on the Board of Appeals, let me simply say that in my prior life, I was working in a job, a full-time job. I had a part-time job. I was working for a nonprofit. I had 2 children. I didn't have any gray hair. And now I'm retired. Children are out of the house. And I have plenty of time to serve and do a job that deserves to be done with this board. And I hope brevity counts, because I would like to be reappointed back to the board, and I'll turn it back to you for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Volke?
I do. Yes, sir. Surprise, surprise. Do you have any cases currently pending before the board?
I do not.
All right. And you obviously have been involved with the board before by your prior involvement on the board. Outside of your position as a board member, have you ever been involved in any other cases?
That I participated in?
Yes, sir.
No.
Okay. And ever represented anyone before the board? No. All right. I do want to ask you about your prior service on the Board of Appeals. Again, I think you've heard me ask a number of questions this evening, about the backlog, the cases, et cetera. Given your history on the Board of Appeals, from what I can count, it looks like at least on 4 prior occasions, you have a pretty good knowledge base. Is that typical or atypical of the Board of Appeals, that level of backlog?
I would say it's not typical.
So it's unusual?
Yes, very unusual.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Thank you, members.
Thank you. Ms. Elizabeth Leight?
Hello, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. My name is Elizabeth Isla Leight. I live at 3541 Forest Haven Drive in Laurel, Maryland. I'm a 25-year resident of Anne Arundel County. I ask your consideration for the position on the Board of Appeals. I have served on several local, state, and national commissions and councils and have experience working with quasi-judicial boards and understand the rules of procedure that impose the responsibility to make fair and equitable decisions. The Board of Appeals holds a public trust. The role is vital in protecting and preserving a vision for Maryland and Anne Arundel County that our residents value, from maintaining vibrant, healthy neighborhoods to safeguarding our precious rural, natural, and historical resources. The decisions we would make will impact people. It's about making choices today to preserve the community we want to live in and want to preserve for our children. What, where, and how we grow can impact our health, taxes, traffic, the environment, and our economic status in the county. The Board of Appeals is vital for citizens seeking to make changes to their properties. It's important that their concerns be heard. If selected to serve on the Board of Appeals, I can assure Anne Arundel County residents that I will listen carefully and make determinations that are fair and equitable. I will work hard to understand the issues presented because the board's decisions impact one of the most valuable investments our residents have, their home and their lifestyle. I can assure them that many decisions made will be made cautiously and with consideration of all the facts and circumstances presented. I'd like to mention briefly that I did participate in the Jessup, Maryland City Small Area Plan in 2004. As a lawyer, I'm familiar with the legal requirements of the Board of Appeals. I took the Board of Appeals education course online, and I have no conflicts at this time. I'm a member of the American Bar Association, Real Property Trust and Estate Section. I have been for 20 years. I follow the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, including property and casualty issues. And I'm a member of the Maryland State Bar Association Agriculture Committee and Anne Arundel County Bar Association, and I am in good standing there. Lastly, for 13 years, I wrote for the neighborhood section of the West County Gazette, published by the Capital Gazette. And I closely followed the West County developments, small D developments, in my neighborhood. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Ms. Leight. Mr. Volke?
Thank you. As a fellow AABA member, welcome. Thank you for your testimony. You noted that you have no conflicts. I just want to clarify. I'm assuming that means you have no cases currently pending before the board.
I do not.
All right. And have you ever had any cases that you've been involved with in the past?
None.
All right. And have you ever represented anyone before the
I have
board?
not.
All right. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Any further questions? Thank you, Ms. Leight.
Thank you for your consideration.
Mr. Peter Massey?
Hello there. Congratulations again. My name's Peter Massey. I live at 224 Old Middle Bottom Road in Annapolis. My qualifications are I've been on the other side of the fence. I am a lifelong resident. I was born here. I've worked construction for close to 50 years. I'm retired now. But I've been on the other side of planning and zoning, permits, stormwater management, and I think that I like the idea of the Board of Appeals. It stands somewhere between the regulations and the courts, and it gives citizens a chance to not resort to a lawyer, to come forward and state the case without prior knowledge. The board does not have prior knowledge, so it's all new. And you get a chance to see it clearly. It seems to me to be an island of common sense in a sea of regulations and rules. And the one thing I can bring to the board is a measure of common sense, which I'm sure you'll agree is not near as common as we would like to think. In short, I'd like to serve. And I think I can bring a unique perspective. I'm sorry, I'm getting sniffles here. And that is it. That is all I have to say.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Volke?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Massey, again, thank you for your application. And I'll ask you the same questions I've asked others. Do you have any cases currently pending before the board?
No.
Have you ever been involved in a case before the board?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell me about that?
It was some 20 years ago. I was putting an addition onto my house. The permits department said you can't put an addition on your house because you're in 150 feet of the right-of-way of Route 50. Well, I went before the board and I said, no, wait a minute, Route 50 came to me. I built the house and the road got wider and wider and wider and wider, and now I'm within 150 feet. And the board logically said, well, yeah, you're right, go ahead and put your addition on. So that was a happy outcome for me.
Okay.
And again, logic got in the way of the regulation.
Okay. And so the only other question I had, have you ever represented anyone else before the board? No? Okay. All right. And it sounds like, if I understood you correctly, you had a successful resolution before the board. It was decided in your favor.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yes. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Mason.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Scott MacMullan?
Chairman Pruski, members of the council, congratulations. Just want to congratulate everyone up on the dais. I'm Scott MacMullan, 1225 Gemini Drive, Annapolis, Maryland. I'm here before you to apply to the Board of Appeals of Anne Arundel County. 3 reasons why I think I would be a good candidate. My community involvement and my ability to listen to many people, my legal experiences, and as a solo attorney, my time flexibility. I can really put some time into this. As a native of Anne Arundel County, I've listened and learned from a wide range of and diverse group of people. I'm committed to the service of this county. I am currently a board member of the Bates Legacy Center, and I was a former member of the Annapolis Human Relations Commission, which has a purpose of treating everyone fairly and equally and ending discrimination. As far as my legal experiences go, I've clerked for the former head administrative judge of Anne Arundel County, Judge Nancy Davis Loomis, where in that capacity I saw a wide range of cases, drafted opinions, and really got a wide range of experience. We also were the most efficient and effective county as far as closing out cases in the state of Maryland when I was clerking for her. So I really know how to kind of push cases forward. I think that's important to note. I have experience in listening to witnesses in my practice, handling cross-examination, watching cross-examination, reviewing evidence, and again, drafting opinions. As a sole attorney, and as far as my community work, I've put a lot of time into this, and I would also put a lot of time into the Board of Appeals. I'd be open to staying later. I'd definitely be open to that, and I don't have any conflicts, but you certainly can clarify that.
Any other questions for Mr. MacMullan?
I'm going to clarify with Mr. MacMullan.
Mr. Vokey.
Certainly, thank you. Mr. MacMullan, I'll just clarify with you, if I may, for a moment.
No problem.
Any cases pending?
No.
Ever represent anyone before the board?
No.
Ever personally involved with anyone before the board? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any further questions? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Roger Massey?
Good evening, everyone, and again, congratulations to you all. Thank you for your service ahead of time. My name is Roger Massey. I live on Fairhaven Road in Tracy's Landing, Maryland. I'm a lifelong Anne Arundel County resident. I've lived in Severn, Odenton, Gambrills, and about 6 years ago moved to South County to a small area down there not too far from the Chesapeake Bay. Upon moving to South County and acquiring some property, my wife and I placed all of our forest land into state forest protection, which we felt was necessary, being fairly close to the Bay Area. Living in Anne Arundel County my entire life, I went on to go in the military. I'm a military veteran, served in the U.S. Air Force in the Far East, and then went on to serve the federal government for 39 years as a mathematician, analyst, program manager, and finally as a liaison officer to many federal law enforcement agencies in Washington, D.C. I retired fairly early, not because I really wanted to, but I think it's important to note that I retired because I had to come home to take care of 4 generations of women in my family that had medical issues, including my mother-in-law with dementia, my wife with diabetes, my daughter with cancer, and a 2-year-old granddaughter that needed some help with my daughter. So I retired and helped take care of them for a few years until some of those issues resolved. And then being fairly young and energetic and wanting to continue serving my state and county, I went back to school at the University of Maryland through the Legacy Leadership Program for Policy. And upon graduating from there 4 years ago, I went to work as a volunteer with the Anne Arundel County delegation in the state legislature, and I work for the delegation chair and the delegation secretary primarily during session, which we're getting ready to come up again, and also throughout the year as needed. Throughout my life living in Anne Arundel County, I've always given back. I've been very lucky in my life to get an education, the only member of my family to have a 4-year degree. And we thought it was very important to give back. So I've been a volunteer with Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, 4-H, Horse Rescue. Right now, I'm a member of the Anne Arundel County Fair, which I do a lot of upkeep and fundraising activities for the fairgrounds. And I stay pretty busy. Even though I did work for the federal government, I was named to the Owenton Small Area Plan by County Executive Janet Owens. That's been quite a few years ago. But I'm very proud of the fact that I helped write that plan and served on the environmental subcommittee, which I thought was very important at the time, and got that plan passed through. Unfortunately, a lot of the items in that plan have not come to fruition, but I think maybe some of the plans may be coming back with the new general development plan coming on. So I think if appointed to the board, I am used to getting things done. I am used to being fair, working with the state delegation. I deal with a lot of people. I have dealt with some of you all coming in to session. I try to make things as easy as possible for people coming in that have to testify, whether it's witnesses, expert witnesses, or just people looking for information. I think if selected to the board, time really means nothing to me. I've worked in the military and with the government. 24 hours a day is a good start. We've worked many, many hours, and I agree. I don't really understand why there's a backlog of appeals. I think if the appeals come up, they should not drag on. We should listen to the testimony and adjudicate that testimony using fair and logical reasoning. I think I can do that. I was a science and math judge also with Anne Arundel County school system in the Fort Meade area. And I think if selected, I will give you a good service. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there any questions? Mr. Volke?
Thank you. Mr. Massey, again, thank you for your application. I'll ask you again the same questions I've asked a number of people. Do you have any cases pending before the board?
I have no cases pending.
Have you ever had cases in the past before the board?
I did have a case. I had a case about 30 years ago. I had a small farm next to the Naval Academy Dairy Farm.
Okay.
Received a permit to build a small barn to have a horse for my daughter because we're 4-H. Everything was fine. The county came out, said you need to do A, B, C, and D because you're obviously going to have animals in the barn. Did A, B, C, D, came to the final inspection, and they said, what do you mean you're going to put a horse in the barn? So they would not allow me to put a horse in my barn. So of course we had to go through the process, and after a few months we were able to come out on the positive end of that because, again, common sense and logic ruled the day.
Okay. And have you represented anyone else in front of the Board of Appeals?
No, I have not.
And just out of personal curiosity, how long did your appeal take before the Board of Appeals? You mentioned it was a few months, if you can recall. I know 30 years ago it's a tough question.
I want to say we started in September and ended the following June.
Okay.
It dragged on
it's a
for some time. There was a lot of postponements that county, I don't believe the county had as many people in their office of zoning and things at that time. Okay. I believe was the reason.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Hare?
I just want to clarify, I think I understand from what you've said so far, but if you were on the Board of Appeals, you'd be willing to consider, either extended hours or alternate arrangements from the current 2-hour cutoff?
Oh, most definitely. And even in looking at some of the folks that have applied also so far, I would hope that the council would look at all areas of the county. I think so far I'm the only one from the South County that has applied, and I would like hopefully all, even if I'm not selected, to have all areas of the council of the county on the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Ms. Katerine Meyer?
Good evening, council members. I just want to echo the sentiments of everyone before me. Congratulations on your inaugurations, and thank you for your service. For the record, my name is Katerine Meyer. I live at 2445 Holly Avenue, Annapolis, Maryland, 21401. I am a community associations attorney practicing in the county. I did not grow up in Anne Arundel County like many of the people before me. I actually grew up at the beach in the Ocean City area. I moved to the big city of Baltimore to go to law school, and then I eventually settled here in Anne Arundel County about 3 years ago. I love the sense of community that the area has to offer, and I fully intend on raising a family here. I'm fully invested in the community. As a community associations attorney, I'm general counsel to condominium and homeowners associations, boards all up and down the Chesapeake Bay, as far north as Cecil County. A large part of my job is advising boards and their communities on the impact of government decisions. Through advising my associations, I'm very familiar with many of the issues that come before the board. I deal a lot with critical area laws, animal control issues in my communities, the impact of land use decisions. As an association attorney, I'm not only required to deal with people, but their issues, and I have to do it together. I'm a lawyer by training, so I do have appreciation for the rule of law and the influence it has on the people it governs. I also have a very strong understanding as an attorney of statutory interpretation, rules of evidence, and board procedures, and operations of the county, which I find are all very helpful for this position. I can be fair and reasonable, and as an attorney, I know that there's two sides to every issue, so I try to step back and see the bigger picture. I have a practical sense approach to solving problems with my communities, and I intend to have the same approach if I was to be appointed to the board. As I said, I have a vested interest in the community. I want to use my legal experience to give back to the community in a meaningful way, and become more involved in public service. I'd like to make decisions that have a positive impact on the future of our county, since I do intend to be here for the long haul. So that's everything about me. I'm open to any questions you all may have.
Thank you. Mr. Volke?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Meyer, thank you for your application and your testimony. I'll ask you the same questions I've asked a number of individuals. Do you have any cases pending before the board?
I do not.
Okay. And have you had any cases in the past?
I have not.
And have you ever represented anyone before the Board of Appeals?
No, I have not.
All right. And as a personal question, the Journal of Land and Development, is that formerly what used to be the Environmental Law Journal at University of Baltimore?
It is.
All right. So I was on that too.
Oh.
All right. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Ms. Maria Patterson?
Good evening. Congratulations on your victories, and I will get straight to the point because one of my philosophies I will bring to the board is efficiency and streamlining the issues. But before I get ahead of myself, my address is 207 Ladybug Way in Edgewater, Maryland. I've lived there for 18 years. I've raised and I'm still raising 3 children there. So I'm very efficient with time management, and I did not know there was a 6 to 7 month backlog, which does make me very nervous, but I will say that if I was on the board, I would not be able to sleep at night with a 6 to 7 month backlog. So I can promise you that efficiency would be my #1 philosophy, but then in addition to that, I think professionalism is a must. I think if there's personality conflicts, you have to treat that like the parents of a child. Side with the other parent and disagree later. I would want hearings to be professional, and I don't think that there would be personality conflicts going forward, I would hope. But if that was the case, I don't think demonstrating that before the public should in any way, shape, or form ever happen. I put my name in for the bench for District Court for Anne Arundel County. That did not pan out, but I have the qualifications and skills to be fair and impartial. I have a boatload of experience. I am a lawyer. I don't know if I mentioned that. I'm glad to see other lawyers have applied. My reason for actually ending up here is because I reached out to Mrs. Hare about whether additional lawyers or lawyers at all would be on the board, because I was very surprised to learn that there weren't any. And at the time, it was not my intention to apply, but things played out, and I think things happen for a reason, so here I am. Time management, fair and impartiality. I've been practicing law for 22 years, 21 years, so I'm very good at spotting the issues and applying the law to the facts. I think that if there's hearings that are running over 2 hours, while it's nice to hear what everyone has to say, you have to be able to spot the issues and get to the point. So while some people might want to talk, I think efficiency is key. You need to know when to step in, redirect, and have the cases move at a rate that can prevent a backlog in the future and hopefully catch up the backlog that unfortunately exists. So I would not be opposed to longer than 2-hour hearings. Simple hearings that I handle take an hour, so I don't know how some of the issues as complex as the matters that come before the board could be completed in 2 hours, so I would be fine with longer hearings. And I think continuing them further delays things because you come back and you have to refresh your memory and you're starting over, and I think that would be, unfortunately, a waste of time. So I'm open to questions, and I know you'll ask them anyways, but negative for the 3 questions Mr. Volke has asked.
I won't ask them then, but thank you.
Thank you.
I did have another question, though, if I may, Mr.
Please.
Chair. Thank you. Ms. Patterson, again, thank you for your application. So I see when you were a Prince George's County attorney, when you were with the Office of Law,
Yes.
I believe at that point you also may have represented the county in board hearings. Were those hearings before the Prince George's County Board of Appeals?
No, I was in litigation until the last few months, and then I started the new county exec, new county attorney, and so I was moved.
Okay.
So I handled some animal control hearings, some correctional facility hearings, but not any Board of Appeals.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions? Thank you for your time.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
it.
much.
Mr. Robert Roppel?
Good evening. My name is Robert Roppel. I live at 105 Charlton Way in Arnold, Maryland. I've been a resident of Anne Arundel County for 39 years, first in Cape St. Clair and most recently for the last 4 in Arnold. While living in the Cape St. Clair, I served on the board of the Improvement Association as both a member and as the president. In addition, I served as the president of the Cape St. Clair Recreation Council for 7 years. And Cape St. Clair, as you know, is a community of approximately well over 2,400 homes. As president and member of the board, in addition to developing a budget and making sure all the bills were paid, countless hours were spent dealing with constituent complaints, zoning and parking issues, neighborhood squabbles, and many other problems too numerous to list. During my tenure, I led a successful effort to reinstate the Strawberry Festival. I presided over the monthly meetings when residents were present, and dealt with the many personalities and concerns that were presented. And as a Recreation Council, I led an effort to refurbish the recreation facilities of the Cape to include new buildings and improve the fundraising efforts of the council. As you can imagine, I was faced with the myriad of complaints when it comes to kids playing and recreation leagues. Both of these community positions provided me with the opportunity to skillfully learn how to deal with the many unknowns that one is presented with. That experience is directly related to what I presume I'll be faced with if I'm appointed to the Board of Appeals. And on December 25th, 2017, I retired from the U.S. government after 41 years of law enforcement experience. I worked for many years as a criminal investigator for the Department of Transportation, Office of Inspector General, and the last 16 years as a special agent in protection detail for the U.S. Secretary of Education. I interviewed individuals nationwide in a variety of circumstances, always obtaining the necessary information for successful cases. I supervised people from San Francisco to Baltimore, which allowed me to be comfortable with a wide variety of personalities. On the protection detail, I traveled extensively, both domestically and internationally, associating with folks from many different walks of life. From this, my experience has taught me that all people are the same if they are respected and treated with dignity, which is what I ascribe to. And then recently, after finishing all the projects that had accumulated around the house from all my years of working, I started looking for something to get involved in. When I read the article in the paper about this position and visited the website, I was excited to apply, as it seems both fascinating and gives me the opportunity to serve my community, which is what I've done my entire life. All of my experience I've told you about fits perfectly with position on the Board of Appeals. I'm adept at public speaking, obviously, as everybody else has been here tonight. Excellent at listening, and I love to ask questions. And based on all that, I can make decisions and have the ability to cooperate with my fellow members to get the job done. I had many regulations and rules to follow while working for the federal government and had to abide by many ethical and moral guidelines, both of which I think fit well in this arena. I'm excited to get involved in this type of position, and being retired means I have a lot of time to do it. In closing, if you appoint me to the Board of Appeals, which I hope you will do, I will make every effort to do an outstanding job. Thank you. No, no, and no.
Thank you.
Mr. Volke? Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Roppel.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mr. Donald Schloss?
Good evening, everyone. Congratulations. Feel like I'm coming before the Supreme Court with 9 seats up here. At any rate, my name is Donald Schloss. I live at 234 Gibson Road in Annapolis, 21401. I became a resident of Anne Arundel County in 1976, and I opened a retail business here at that time. I became a fully licensed realtor and insurance agent in '92, and other than the year and a half I spent in Los Angeles in the entertainment business, I've been a full-time resident of Anne Arundel County. In my capacity as a realtor, I've worked with a number of local builders and developers. Upon coming to Annapolis, I immediately got involved in the community. I joined the JCs, got involved with Special Olympics, the Toys for Tots, Harvest for the Homeless, Harvest for the Hungry, and Give Back Your Christmas to county police officers, where go in and let them have a day or two with their family during Christmas. At any rate, I have a good background with builders and developers. I went through the permitting process myself when opening up the businesses, and that was quite an ordeal, an eye-opener. At any rate, I'd like to have the opportunity to give back to the community and the citizens of the county. My capacity as a realtor, which I'm doing full-time now, gives me a very flexible schedule. So I would have no problems putting in the time necessary to get at the backlog of cases before you. I have great references. I worked with the ex-mayor of Annapolis, Richard Hillman. I worked with State Senator Big Ed Riley. Ran his nationwide office for 6 years when he was starting his political career. And that's pretty much it. I'd like to take any questions you might have.
Thank you. Mr. Volke?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Schloss, thank you for your application and coming before us this evening. I'll ask you the same questions again. Any cases pending before the Board of Appeals?
No, sir.
Any cases that you've been involved in the past before the board?
No, sir.
And have you ever represented anyone in any capacity before the board?
No, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Schloss. Moving on to Mr. Scott Schaffer.
Good evening. My name is Scott Schaffer. I live at 1028 Old Bay Ridge Road in Annapolis, here in District 6. And I'm here tonight to ask for your consideration for the Board of Appeals. My background includes over 20 years of experience in finance and accounting roles, and I hold a bachelor's and master's degrees in economics. I previously served in the Office of the County Executive during Laura Newman's tenure. During that time, I worked with the Commission on Excellence that she created to review the functions and processes of every county department and agency, including planning and zoning, inspections, permits, and administrative hearings. I was the point person on that commission and in charge of putting forth a number of recommendations that came into play. Because of that knowledge, I feel I have a good understanding of the types of matters reviewed by the board and would welcome the opportunity to continue to serve my county. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Volke.
Same questions, Mr. Schaffer. Any cases pending before the board?
No.
Any cases previously that you've been involved with before the board?
No.
And have you ever represented anyone before the board?
No, I have not.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you, sir, for your time.
Thank you.
Ms. Robynn Squires.
Hello, and I guess, again, congratulations. My name is Robynn Squires. I live at 250 Harlem Road, Pasadena, Maryland. One of the reasons that I applied, to answer your question, actually I was on the other end of a recent Board of Appeals situation. I did go into the 2-hour delay, and we had to stop it. They had to go out and look at the property. And at that time, honestly, there were some other, we should have been able to offer more information. Because of the time frame, it was a matter of, okay, do you want to come back and reschedule it, or can you close it up? So we just ended up, closed it up and ended it. And it still worked out, it worked out positively. But I realized that there is obviously some issues on that end, so I thought, well, maybe I could offer something. I have both private sector and government. I worked for the government not for very long, for about 18 months, and I had some health issues and actually had to take a medical leave. Since then, being home, semi-retired, I guess, and the kids being gone, my son's decided that I needed something to do. So he said, maybe you would like this. So my experience with the county, I have been a builder and a land developer for about, I guess, 30 years. Have done some major and minor subdivisions. I also worked for Ryland Homes and handled development and with that and contracting. For the government, I was a contracts manager and handled all of the contracts, big contracts for Aberdeen Proving Grounds. Other than that, let me think here. I've lived in Anne Arundel County my whole life, and my family have same thing. They're still here. My son is here, and my mother, my sister, and so we're pretty involved in the county. Going through the process with my own company, I have dealt with the permitting, the land development, critical area, zoning, a little bit of everything. So I think coming from this side of it, I have a different view, and is what I'm hoping maybe I could offer from this point of view. Some of the frustration and some of the, the positive things that the county is doing. I am educated, I suppose. I have my MBA. I'm not a lawyer. I know there's a lot of lawyers in the room, but I do have my MBA. I guess since my health issues and being home, honestly, it looked like a good opportunity for me to possibly be able to put my skills and my past experience as a businesswoman to use. The other thing that I did handle, our community, I live in Riviera Beach, and there was a pretty extensive lawsuit that was filed that I was the head of for our community. It was kind of a crazy deal, but they were trying to sell some of our community property, and I felt very passionate that that was wrong, and it was a huge legal battle that went on for a couple of years that I headed, and thank goodness did end up that they ended up giving the land back, basically. So I guess that's basically what I have to offer, and if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you. Mr. Volke?
I always have questions. Ms. Squires, thank you for coming down, and you and I are actually neighbors, so relatively close. I'm in Elizabeth's Landing, which isn't far down the road from you. So
I thought you were going to say Revere Beach, and you knew all about the lawsuit. But
well, I was going to ask you about the lawsuit, but I'll ask my standard 3 first, and then I'll follow up. You did note that you've had prior cases before. Do you have any cases pending at this time with the Board of Appeals?
No.
And have you ever represented anyone else in front of the Board of Appeals?
No.
All right. Now I'm going to come back to the before we go to the Revere Beach issue that you noted, I want to ask you about your experience with the Board of Appeals. You indicated that there was an option for you to either close out or sort of to drag this process. Let me ask you this. Did you feel as though you had a full and fair opportunity for hearing before the Board of Appeals as it was constituted?
I would say yes for the most part. There were, like I said, some other things that we would have added. But yeah, I still would say, you know, it was fair, and they gave me the option. You know, they said, do you want to, can you, finish it in 5 minutes, or, we have our deadline and we can reconvene and start over, but continue.
Okay.
So I think they were fair about it.
Good. And was that in the last 4 years? Was that the 2014 to 2018 Constitution of the Board?
I'm going to say last 6 months.
Okay, so very recently.
Maybe a year, but definitely within the last year.
The lawsuit in Revere Beach, was this the one where they were trying to take the riparian rights over there, or is that a different lawsuit?
Well, that's the riparian rights. Might be the one
that's Sunset Beach,
yes,
maybe. That might not be your committee.
That is Sunset Beach.
Okay.
That's exactly what I was going to tell you. And I don't know whatever happened with that one, but no, that's not us. This was where we had a homeowners association, and there's a separate private company years ago that was deeded the community property.
Gotcha.
And they were basically handling it as if it were a private company, and sold the land without the community knowing, or it was kind of a crazy deal. But anyway, we had to fight that and go all the way through.
Did that go to the Board of Appeals, or did that go straight to the Circuit Court?
That one, actually, I think we handled it in District Court or Circuit Court, but it didn't go to anything higher. No, I don't think it went through it wasn't anything to do with Board of Appeals, because it wasn't like a zoning or anything like that. Gotcha. It was more of a private issue, I guess, between the association and the residents.
All right, Ms. Squires, thank you very much.
Any further questions? Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Brian Stanton?
Evening, thanks for having me. Brian Stanton, I'm at 992 Weiss Way in Davidsonville. Very briefly, I'm here as an interested and motivated resident. I'm not from Anne Arundel County, but my family and I relocated here about 15 years ago. I've raised my children here. My experience has been in the private sector, primarily in commercial investment banking in the last 15 or so years. The job that took me to this part of the world was in the energy marketing business with Constellation Energy. Since I've been down here, I've been extremely impressed with the way the county has provided a good quality of life for my family and myself, made lots of good friends. So I'm here really out of a interest in serving, giving back to the community, and applying, take the opportunity to apply some of my business principles to something that I feel very important about, which is preserving and protecting the quality of life issues we have, not just where I live, but in the county as a whole. I think there's a lot to offer a lot of folks here with respect to things like development and sensible development, sustainable development. Those are the kind of issues that are motivating me to throw my resume in the ring. With respect to Mr. Volke's 3 questions, they're all no. Although I have been involved in the Davidsonville Area Civic Association for the last year as a board member and as treasurer, and we have had positions with respect to certain appeal issues, but I've never been involved or attended any of the hearings, so I'm not quite sure if that's a gray area or I just in the interest of transparency. I thought I would mention that. We first moved here to Edgewater and lived in Edgewater for a few years. Since '05, we moved out to Davidsonville, and the way that some of the commercial development has kind of run down Route 2 and changed the landscape quite a bit is really one of my motivating factors as well. I think economic development is the lifeblood of what we do here, but I would like to do it in a way that is sensible and protects the quality of life that I've come to enjoy down here and preserve it for my kids. And that's it. Questions, by all means.
Yes, Ms. Hare.
Hi, good evening.
Hi,
Thank you for coming. Currently, you're with True Light Energy.
Yes, that's a private consulting energy practice. It's something I've been doing the last few years. It's essentially a two-man shop with a partner of mine. So I work out of the house. We generally do energy consulting around sustainable development and the delivery of energy in what they call restructured or competitive markets.
Okay, but it says it's in Boston. Do you travel back and forth?
Frequently, yeah. The partner who founded it lives in Boston, so
Okay.
that's the address of the company, but I do most of my work out of my house.
Do you think that might be problematic, or maybe it wouldn't be? Maybe you can structure your travel. But
Oh,
in
no,
terms of the hearings?
my construction, I travel whenever I need to. so
Okay, okay,
I'm not constrained in that regard.
okay.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Stanton.
Thanks very much.
And the last applicant is Ms. Robynn Weiss.
Good evening. Congratulations. I'm going to read something very brief and then any questions. I live in Annapolis. For over 30 years, I've lived in Arundel County while raising a family. My son and daughter attended Aleph-Bet Jewish Day School in Annapolis for nearly a decade, while I served on the Board of Trustees, first as Vice President for Education, then as President. Besides running board meetings, my duties included, among other things, supervising the principal and faculty, managing board committees, and acting as liaison between 5 area synagogues and the day school. Along with my degrees in psychology, skills acquired from mediation training at the Conflict Resolution Center, where I completed level 1 and 2, and divorce mediation proved invaluable. Several years ago, after freelancing at the Capital Gazette and while writing for the St. John's College Alumni Magazine, I was assigned a 4-part series on public education in Anne Arundel County for What's Up Annapolis magazine. While researching and interviewing members of the Board of Education, the Teachers Union, the outgoing and incoming superintendents of schools, etc., I learned a great deal about local politics. As a freelance writer and beyond, my background in psychology and literature has taught me the importance of listening well and communicating clearly. If I'm selected to the County Board of Appeals, I will do my best to interact with other members in an open-minded and positive manner with the goal of enhancing group respect and fairness. This position for me would be a challenge and an honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Volke?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Weiss, thank you for being here again this evening. Do you have any cases pending before the Board of Appeals?
No to all.
All right. No to all?
No.
Perfect.
Yes.
We'll shortchange that.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Great, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
I just want to take a moment. I think I can speak on behalf of the entire council to the 23 applicants. We certainly thank you for coming out and putting yourself out there. Anytime public service with commissions, we appreciate that. Please note that there are only 7 positions that will be chosen, but there are other commissions that Anne Arundel County does have, and I encourage you to kind of read the website and look at the county executive and the county government's site as well. Qualified residents, though, who are selected to sit on the Board of Appeals will be notified prior to the next council meeting. This council will appoint new members via resolution at its December 17th, 2018 meeting. New members will be sworn in on December 18th, 2018 at 10 a.m. in the clerk's office at the Circuit Court. Is there any other business to be brought before the county council by any of the members? Thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. No opposed? The county council is adjourned until December 17th, 2018.